This is Evolve Your Health Beyond the Bench, a podcast dedicated to everything fitness, health, and adventure. This is your time to evolve.
Thanks for coming on, Ian. Police officer, life coach, personal trainer, social media influencer.
That was never the intention. I'm going to be honest with you. It was I joined the job when I was 21, and the intention was to be a police officer. That was what it was all about. And probably over the span of probably 12 years, I started to struggle with the job a little bit. I was becoming a little bit of a recluse. My wife noticed that my moods were changing. And we were on holiday, and she just said to me, "Look, something's got to change here. You know, you're living and working, but there's nothing in between. You know, your rest days aren't really, you're not achieving anything." And she was right. It was hard to hear, but she was exactly right. So before I joined the job, I'd done a degree in sport and exercise nutrition. And it has always been there in the back of my mind. And I'd done various different courses while I was still in the job, but I'd never really done anything.
So leading up to, you see, with 21 when you joined the police force?
I was 21, mate, yeah.
So leading up to that point, obviously, I assume that when you signed the application for sports science at uni, your intention was something sports-based, was it? What did you do leading up there?
Physiotherapy. That's what I was gonna do. I got offered a role in a company, and I can't remember the name for the life of me, but they were basically doing analysis of footballers, and I kind of saw it and I thought, you know what, I really like that. So I applied for that, and I kind of got offered it, but I had to move up to Scotland. And at the age of 21, I thought that ain't really for me. So I applied for the fire service and I applied for the police, and I got through both, and I had a little bit of a decision to make. And kind of what made me go towards the police was that I'd always got an interest in fast cars, and my uncle was a police officer, and that was kind of pushed me towards it. And then I had massive amounts of imposter syndrome when I joined. I was 21, I was 9 stone, I got no life experience at all, and I was walking into people's houses and trying to give them advice on how they should live their life. And when you walk into a house and you've got somebody that's maybe late 30s, early 40s, I'm stood there trying to pretend and trying to tell them, you've got to leave the house. One of my first interactions was I went in and there was a guy probably about 6'3", a built bloke, and I looked at him and he just looked straight at me and said, "What on earth are you going to do?" And I thought to myself, you've got a fair point, actually. What am I going to do? And I quickly had to kind of learn how to use this a little bit. And I think communication's massive. But I was massively insecure about the way that I looked in the uniform. And despite the nutritional background and being in a gym environment, I hadn't really implemented it. And the shifts were just making it more and more difficult. My eating habits were getting worse. The sleep wasn't there. And it was starting to really grate on me. I didn't feel comfortable in the role, and my life outside the role wasn't really helping either.
So what you said, your shifts were really affecting your life, your lifestyle, health, relationships. What does the shifts look like?
Well, it will depend force by force, but the force that I'm in, we're doing 6 on 4 off. So that's 2 earlies, 2 lates, and then 2 night shifts. So your body clock's all over the place, and then 4 days off.
So there isn't a lot of room really when you're doing 2 day, 2 late, 2 nights. There's not a lot of time to adjust.
I think that's one of the biggest things that I struggled with. It was one, it was the adjustment of your sleep pattern, and then it was, well, what do I take with me to work? You're not really getting a break. I mean, even 18 years ago, you didn't get a break, but now it's even worse because there's just not enough police officers. But you know, what do you eat? How do you get your energy? You know, how can I make things easy for myself? But I had no idea how to do it, and you fall into this trap of takeaways.
Well, what's the go-to for the masses? So if you just look collectively at the emergency services, I suppose, what is the done thing around nutrition, I suppose? Because I would assume that a lot of people just make an assumption that there's cafeterias in stations, that there's set break times which you just kind of clock off, have your half hour and then come back on or whatever. Is that the case?
No, I mean a lot of canteens have been removed, so there isn't a canteen. So you don't really get a break either, and that's I suppose one of the downfalls. If it's busy, you're not going to get a break, and the majority, if police officers and emergency service workers are listening to this, they'll probably resonate massively in the fact that you might well book in to have some food, but you'll get turned out because there's too many jobs, outstanding jobs that you need to go to.
From an outsider looking in, you would think they would want the police officers to be like as healthy, as strong, as fit as possible, and try and provide, even like you say, even a cafeteria that serves healthy, nutritious meals, some kind of, I mean, it might be a well-being program, I'm not sure, but it's something that definitely should be there if it isn't.
If I'm honest with you, that was the driving force behind what I started, because it's just not there. And everyone from the outside looking in would think it, and you would expect it to be like that, but it's just not. The well-being and the lifestyle factors aren't looked at all. Even in your initial training, not once do they talk about how you could actually get the most bang for your buck out of your food choices, how to sleep properly, how to deal around the shift.
Is there a union or anybody, could you through your various channels bring that up and almost start a campaign or make it a little bit more? I've got no doubt that it's probably in everybody's sights, everybody's aware of it within the job, but where do you go from there? What do you do to make it a problem that needs solving or an objective that people just turn a blind eye to?
Well, I think the reality of what's happened for the past, probably since I've been in, and probably years before I even joined, it's turned a blind eye to it. That's ultimately what's happened. You know, the
Because if
fitness.
we think about it logically, you're doing potentially a physical job, mental strain, and as the time gets tougher, for example, a busy shift or a dangerous job or whatever, that's the time that you need your focus. That's the time you need to stay awake on nights. That's the time that you need to not have your mind drifting off, wondering about where your carbohydrates or your sugars are coming from. Yeah, that's the time you haven't got it. So it's a problem, and I suppose a risk as well.
One big thing that it causes as well, that you'll get a lot of police officers that are looking at themselves what they were before they joined the job, and then 3 years down the line they look at themselves and think, well, you know what, I've put probably a couple of stone on, my eating habits are poor, I joined this job to be a better version of myself, and I've actually turned out to be a worse version of myself, and it becomes a problem.
I mean, it seems to be a thing now. There's a lot of people, especially young people, there's a lot of police officers, and they're overweight, out of shape. There's a lot of them, I've seen them myself, and they don't realise that it's because of the shift patterns, the work. They haven't got time to really cook or prep any healthy food. It's takeaways, and when they're not at work, they're probably exhausted and don't move much, and they're just sitting on the couch trying to unwind, watching TV or something like that.
Right, it comes with potentially what they've seen. I mean, if you look at the fitness test for entry into the police in the UK, it's not brilliant anyway, is it really? And I mean, that could be a risk factor for the public that's being protected, but more so the officer that's doing the job. If they're struggling, is it a 5.5 on the bleep test? If you're struggling and really worried to get that on day one, that's in my opinion, you know, that's a slippery slope. And I'm not saying you should be special forces fit, but you've got a job to do, and if you can't maintain that or struggle to get that on day one, then once you come into the period where you can't train, you're too tired to go to the gym or whatever, then where do you go from there?
Well, I think, I mean, some forces have reduced it to 3.7. I mean, we all know that is not something that should be tasking, not for an operational police officer anyway.
I mean, if you take away, if my car gets nicked tonight and the police officer chasing him doesn't catch him, that's you know, it's hard lines, isn't it, at the end of the day? But like you say, what about the 21? I mean, we've seen the social medias of the really young looking police, the one kicking about at the minute, where this guy looks about 14, 15.
The one with the blonde hair.
There's a couple of them, isn't there, that's knocking about at the moment. I don't know if that's genuine or not. It certainly looks genuine. But if that guy is single crewed and he turns out to somebody that, like you say, he's 6'4", he's maybe had a couple of drinks or whatever else, and he's not fit enough to run a 4 on the bleep test, he's got no chance in the back lane with this guy, has he? So, and we're talking about protecting himself and his own health and well-being at that point, you know.
If I'm going to be honest with you, I think it needs a complete reform whereby what you're looking at is I have contacted various different forces and said, look, I'm more than happy to come in under, my business and support people when they're joining. Because even just having, a day, 2 days whereby you focus and help people to understand what the challenges are they're going to be facing, I think you could save millions because people will start off on the right foot and understand how they could do things a little bit better and make the shifts just that little bit easy to deal with. But then it benefits everybody because the job gets the best version of you, you're the best version of yourself, and ultimately everyone wins.
Is there much of a churn out of new recruits that come through the door, pass entry or whatever, and then actually get into the seat and think, wait a minute, this is tough, this is a bit harder than what I thought,
Yeah,
again?
retention levels are terrible.
So, without getting into politics of things, we hear the story in the press time and time again. It's all money, isn't it? So, I understand that there's budgets in place and whatever, but the fact that they're recruiting people, training people, and then leaving again, that obviously comes with its own price. And if you look back at the military, they used to look at life courses, I suppose, where you go away for a week or two or whatever it was, see what the job was actually about, and then make a decision from that, I suppose. But I don't know if people are coming in blind or whatever, but there's probably a place to do something along those lines. The problem is the security aspect of it, I suppose.
I mean, for me, you've sometimes you've got to speculate to accumulate, and if it's going to cost a little bit of money, then for me, you're spending it on the right things because what you're going to do is you're going to make the officers more productive. You're going to get more out of them. You're going to keep people in the job for longer, which is going to benefit everybody. You don't want a churn of, police officers keep coming in and going because ultimately no one gets the experience then. And ultimately the public don't get what they deserve either. So for me, putting a little bit of money into it, and that's not me saying for me, there's loads of great people out there that do great work, and if forces want to go a different route, then that's fine. But if it benefits the officers long term and we can help people feel better about themselves, surely that's got to be something that's worth investing in.
Do you think that there should be some kind of, or police officers should do some kind of martial arts like jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, boxing?
I do, and I think again it'll come down to money because how do you push that out to the masses? There'll be certain people that don't want to do it. There's certain people in roles maybe that will say, well, we're not going to be, front line. We're non-confrontational. But for me, that should be something that should be a little bit of a standard because if you start relying on your kit too much, well, that kit might fail at some point, and then it's down to
Well,
you.
they might as well just replace you with a robot in that
Yeah,
case.
do you know what I mean?
Takes
Like,
the human side out of it, just arm everybody like the Americans, and that's the problem solved, is it? Because
Robocop.
yeah, in reality, it's not, is it? And I'm not saying every American officer is trigger happy, but whenever you hear the stories of people getting a bit overzealous on the weapons, it seems to come from that side of the Atlantic, doesn't it? So
yeah,
We'll rewind a little bit and go back to when you started the police force and then you realised it was affecting your health, fitness, your life at home. What were your first steps to be a bit more healthy and get that balance and try and get better sleep and everything around that? What was your steps into improving your overall well-being?
well, the first thing that I did is I actually invested in a coach. And at the time, there was no one really that was doing anything emergency service based. So
was that a life coach or a fitness kind of PT?
fitness based coach, yeah.
Physical or online or?
They're still about now. Who I went with, and it was eye-opening, but probably for the right and wrong reasons because I quickly realised that if you don't do it and you don't understand what coming off a night shift feels like or doing a late shift, it doesn't matter how good you are in terms of being a coach. You can't relate to the struggles that you're facing. I got some great results and I felt better in myself and ultimately I made progress, but there was a lot left on the table and I had a lot of unanswered questions. I got my understanding that I'd done in my degree and I could kind of do various different things, but doing a degree doesn't prepare you for the challenges that you're going to face being a police officer. That's an ideal world scenario, whereas policing probably and the emergency service world isn't. So I kind of invested in that, kind of got a bit better. I went from 9 stone up to about 12.5 stone. So a good little jump. Was it in the best way possible? No, I still have body confidence issues, but I look better in the uniform, definitely more confident. After I went with a coach, I thought, you know what, I can do this myself, as everyone does. And I kind of took myself to 15 stone. Again, probably wasn't like the most amazing way of doing it, but I felt a hell of a lot better. I was a better police officer. I was a lot more confident dealing with situations because I felt better in myself. And then when I was at 15, I thought, you know what, I need to kind of bring this down a little bit. It's no good feeling good in the uniform when I'm looking in the mirror and I'm not happy with myself. It's that never ending cycle of everyone does it who goes to a gym.
Is there any, should we use the word banter within the job about colleagues' sizes, demeanour, I suppose, the way you can kind of hold yourself? If you go and you're a little skinny guys, do you get a bit of grief off the lads? Do you?
Look, there's banter, and I think the banter's brilliant. You know, I think you've got to have it. If you remove that, I think you'll probably ruin policing. But I don't think anyone would ever call anybody out for, you know, a size issue or anything like that. One, because I think they're probably scared of being classed as bullying.
I suppose, wouldn't it? If they over,
Yeah,
well,
it would
the
be.
line is, isn't it?
But no, I don't think people would really. I mean, look, there might be people listening to this and going, "Well, I've had experience of that," but only from my perspective, I haven't kind of seen that. You can get someone that's probably 6'4", 6'5", and built like a brick shit house, and you probably think, "Wouldn't want to mess with them," and they might get a bit of stick for being built like a unit, but probably not the other way.
Or become the target on some jobs, maybe.
Exactly, yeah.
Just a quick one as well. So if anybody hasn't seen your Instagram, is it just Instagram that you're on, or?
Yeah, it is primarily. When I first started, I started off with a little Facebook group, which is a private group, and then it kind of grew to Instagram, and that's realistically where, you know, we'll put the majority of our content out, and that's at Blue Light Lifestyle.
So if anybody wants to have a look at that, then certainly check it out. But for anybody that doesn't understand, I suppose the banter, the emergency service life, I suppose a lot of your content now, would be fair to say, is quite humour based. And like any other member of the emergency services, a lot of it gets directed towards, I suppose, the fire service. But you know, it's if you work within the industry, you'll understand that. If you don't, maybe it might be a little bit alien. But one of the things that gets brought up time and time again is certain parts of their nutrition, shall we say, and the fact that they get a little bit of recovery time and some time in the gym. They've had stick for that for a long time. It's probably something that's going to continue. But taking the good from that, do you think any of the other services should implement the likes of gym time, rest time, a communal cooking area, that kind of thing?
1,000,000%. I mean, my banter towards them a lot of the time is out of, I wish we were doing it. If I'm going to be honest, I've got some really good pals in the fire service. Just, you know, even people in this space that are doing stuff for firefighters, and they do awesome work. The major difference between the two services is just the calls for service. And the reason why they can do what they do is because they don't get called out as much as what, you know, the police do, or, you know, the ambulance service do. And they utilize their time in the right way, in my opinion. They create a community. They get on really well. They use it to benefit themselves. And on nights when they haven't got anything to do, what are we expecting the fire service to do? Go and patrol looking for fires? It just doesn't happen. You know, why wouldn't you get a bit of sleep? But at the same point, I think what maybe a lot of police forces can do, and maybe some of the ambulance services could look at, is maybe incorporating maybe, you know, a 45-minute period whereby you can use a gym, whether it's at the end of a shift or a start of a shift. It'd be hard to implement, if I'm going to be honest, because it is busy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at there's a new concept, isn't there, of these tri-stations going about now? So I don't know if there'd maybe be something on the back of that where people can use gyms and things. So for anyone that doesn't know the tri-stations, and I think there's a few about now, isn't there, where police, fire service, and ambulance are all based within the same building, and
Yeah.
have kind of a recreational area that I suppose you could use in and out of work can only be a benefit, really, and probably an aid to things like staff retention and things as well. So
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of police forces are going down the route of doing gyms. You know, that's something that wasn't there for a good chunk of my service. There wasn't gyms, and now there is. A lot of the firearms units will kind of fund their own gyms, which is great. A lot of firearms teams across the country will get downtime to go to the gym as well. That's built in for them. But for some of the other specialist units, for example, I'm on a traffic department. That's not built in for us. And the argument will always be for me, well, even though you're on a traffic department or a roads policing department, we'll probably have more foot chases than anybody.
I was just about to come to that. And
Yeah,
that comes with it from my point of view as a personal trainer, something I've considered quite a lot. If you imagine the stereotype of traffic police, you sat in a car on a motorway for whatever, an hour or two, and all of a sudden a nick car goes flying past, and before you know it, you're out of the car into a sprint. From my training as a personal trainer in the gym, I've always had to warm people up, stretch people off, and then you go through a process before you go into kind of more high octane stuff, your sprints and things like that. So on the back of that, does injuries ever come about?
yeah. I mean, I've done my adductor 3 times. I've always had all. I mean, that was just ego lifting in the gym that did it the first time. I was on a V squat, and instead of me, I used to get up before and early, and I'd go to the gym probably about 4 o'clock in the morning before my early shift. And because it was a bit of a rush, it was a case of I'd just go in, probably wouldn't warm up properly, and then the ego took over, and before you know it, I popped my abductor. So I was out for probably, well, I wasn't off work, but I certainly couldn't do anything significant for probably 2, 3 months. And I've done it a couple of times when I've been sprinting. I've jumped out the car and you can just feel it go, and I think, oh God, here we go. But it is going from nothing to an all-out sprint, and it just. But for a lot of people, because it's not built into your day, and there is always an element of personal responsibility. We can't get around it. You know, the job can't do everything for you, but what they can do is they can certainly support you a little bit better than I think what they do. And having gyms in police stations and making them accessible to everybody and doing like what you mentioned earlier about maybe doing some jiu-jitsu or some sort of combat stuff, to me just feels right. You know, we've got the fire service that are supporting their firefighters really, really well. And we've got other sectors that are doing it really well as well. So I don't see why the police and the police service wouldn't do it as well. But it just doesn't seem to be top of the priority list, unfortunately.
I think there would be a lot more respect from the public and
Yeah, I agree.
potential criminals if they know that, oh, every police officer's in shape, they're eating right, they're doing some kind of martial art or anything like that. I think respect goes far
Yeah.
in regard to looking up, not even a police officer, just looking up to someone in the gym that's in really good shape, they're fit, they're healthy. Just the respect from your regular gym goers is massive. Never mind someone just on the street, a potential criminal looking up to a police officer, especially regarding trying to get people in the police force, and you're looking up and thinking, oh, they're strong, they're fit, they know martial arts, they're healthy. I want to do that. I want to be that person. Because I look up to them, so I want to go in and do what them are doing.
No, I agree. I really do. And I think public perception is massive. But also, when you turn up to a job, you want to be able to exude a little bit of confidence. And when you haven't got the right foundation, you're not. You're turning up and you're relying on your kit to get you out of the situation, or you kind of a little bit working within yourself because you haven't got that confidence in who you are. And I think that's massive.
And on the back of that, also people ringing the police to come out. I think a lot of people wouldn't, because they're like, well, what they're going to do,
Yeah, I agree.
especially when it comes to some kind of maybe domestic violence or anything like that. If you were confident that the police were going to come out, and like you were confident in their abilities to restrain somebody and deal with the situation more hands on, and they were confident to do that, which I guess is needed a lot of the time as a police officer. I think a lot of people don't want to ring the police because they've lost confidence in what their abilities are and what they can do, and I guess that's because you see some police officers and they're overweight and they're out of shape, and they come out and they basically, how can I put it?
It's red tape, isn't it? Bound by red tape as to what they can
It
and
is.
do a lot of the time, or physically not able or whatever. I mean, there was something in the Times, I think it was a study done by possibly Oxford or Cambridge, and the Times said that there was 3/4 or just short of 750,000 people that work frontline emergency services that took time off work because of PTSD in 2023. And another article in The Guardian said that paramedics felt like they were working in a war zone at the minute. You mentioned a little bit earlier that the churnout rate was quite high and that people tended not to stick in the job for such a long time. Surely some of the money with people being on the sick could be reallocated to maybe additional time off work, to better shift patterns, better facilities, eating, exercise, that kind of thing. What's your thought on that? Because naturally that would help with your retentions. It would help with inevitably cost saving come the end of the financial year.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier about speculating to accumulate, because everyone looks at it as, well, that's an initial cost, but yet the initial cost will save you millions later on.
Yeah,
And I
an
think,
initial cost for the first 6 or 8 weeks or whatever
yeah,
the time period is.
and I think that for me would be the big thing, especially when you join, because what every police force will do it different. They'll do the initial training differently. They've all got their own ideas on what works and what doesn't. Sometimes it's 18 weeks, sometimes it's 22, sometimes it's a residential. But for every person that joined, we should be giving them more support in relation to how they can live their lifestyle better. Now, I'm not saying that every police officer that comes in is going to look at it and go, well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. But if you go in with a clearer mind, at least as the job then could turn around and go, well, you know what, we're giving you quite a bit of support there. Maybe the onus is on you a little bit now. But at the minute, they can't say that because they're offering nothing. There's nothing there. And that's why people like me and the other people in this space are able to do what we do, because the officers don't feel supported. They don't know how to deal with these things. And this is people that are brand new. This is people that have been 30 years.
Getting back to a little bit regarding the nutrition and fitness side, a lot of people think that's just for the physical benefits. But I guess as a police officer, any kind of first responder, there's a lot of mental benefits there from eating healthy, working out, and especially sleep, trying to stick to some kind of circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So what would be your blueprint? Just a brief description of what your blueprint would be towards any kind of shift worker or first responder shift worker. How would you go about trying to improve their health and fitness physically and mentally?
The first thing is, I think, what can happen a lot of the time is people can massively overcomplicate it. There's loads of stuff out there that people will say to you, well, you need to do this, you need to do this morning routine, you need to eat 5 meals a day, you need to eat 6. The reality is that's not working.
Social media is a misinformation minefield, like it's terrible.
Yeah.
You'll see a
Yeah.
90-second video of a reel, someone telling you something, and they'll be like, oh, it must be true, I'll try that.
And yesterday, I did a little reel on like a morning routine that one of the influencers had kind of put out. I massively respect him, actually, he's brilliant. However, it just doesn't fit around what you could possibly do as a police officer or emergency service worker. So for me, it's about keeping it easy and simple. So the first thing is, let's look at your hydration. Are you drinking enough fluid? But yeah, I think the first thing is, can we start your day in the right way, hydrating upon wake? Let's start your day off with a little bit of a small habit that, if you do consistently, will definitely make a big difference. Then, how much fluid are you drinking? Are you drinking enough whilst on shift? Now, a lot of police officers will say, well, I don't drink on shift because I need the toilet every 2 minutes and then I'm not going to be able to get there. I totally get it. However, I'd prefer you to go to the toilet than be lacking energy, mental clarity, and something go horribly wrong.
Or dropping into the coffee and energy drinks on night.
Exactly.
Doing it a bit, I suppose.
Yeah. And then
that's a big thing as well. If you're doing night shift or late shift even, just gulping that caffeine down, it's going to be difficult to get to sleep and unwind when you get home.
I mean, the one thing that we'll look at immediately is, like I say, we'll look at some small little habits. So another big thing that everyone comes to us with is, well, I need to do 10,000 steps a day. And I'll always say to them, so, well, no, you don't actually. Because on an early shift, for example, you might be on a watch all day. So you might only get 3,000 steps in, 4,000 steps in. So why don't we do it across a week instead? Because that will give you more opportunity to hit your goal rather than you feeling like you failed when all you're doing is you're just living your life. You're not able to achieve it unless you're going to go out when it's pissing down your rain after you've come back from an early shift and go and walk around the block. But the reality is that benefiting anybody? Probably not. And then in relation to the nutrition, we always talk about meal prep, and everybody sees like these elaborate things on social media whereby people are, making 15 meals at the start of the week and then they're putting them in. Well, a lot of those require a microwave, and you ain't getting your refs and you're not getting your food break. So what happens is you look at it at the end of your shift and it's been sat for like 9, 10 hours, and then you don't have it and you've eaten nothing. So for me, it's very much about saying to people, well, let's make a bit of a routine around your meal preps for it to be quick, simple, and easy. Wraps, bagels, cold pastas, smoothies. I know, should we drink our calories? In an ideal world, probably not. But we're not living in an ideal world. We're living in a world whereby you might need to do that just to keep you on track with what you're looking to achieve. So we'll always focus around having quick, simple, and easy meals to take with you that don't require a microwave and you can eat on the go. And then looking at like protein snacks. Everyone associates protein with the gym and they think it's for bodybuilders, but the reality is that it's the most filling macronutrient and it's going to stop you from snacking while you're on shift on the things that are probably going to put you into a calorie surplus. And the other thing is it's the thermic effect of food, so you're going to burn more calories at rest the more protein that you consume. And I keep trying to push this out to people that let's not demonize protein as being something that is a bodybuilder thing. Let's actually put it as it's actually something that can be really beneficial for everybody. So I'll always look at calories and protein at the start rather than looking at like how many carbs you're consuming or your fats. Look, if you're going to go and do a competition and you're going to try and compete, yeah, that's probably very important. But for a lot of people, this is a lifestyle thing. And if we can get you looking at your calories and having a better understanding of your food choices and getting you eating a little bit more protein so you're feeling fuller and more and feeling a little bit better of yourself on shift, then ultimately you're going to win. So those are the little things that we will always look at the start to try and implement.
It's going to be massive for it as well, isn't it? If the person's not enjoying the food, inevitably it's not going to stick, is it?
Look, I mean, I've done it. Chicken and rice. I mean, it's like a staple bodybuilder, like you eat your chicken and rice, but that doesn't work for the majority of people that we're dealing with. People want to lose a little bit of weight, feel better about themselves, and be a bit fitter and stronger. They're not thinking about stepping on a stage. They're not thinking about competing or having abs. Some people just want to feel better about themselves and have a better understanding of the food choices and feel better at work and at home. And if you can make it easy, you might win.
I think you see a lot of these days, people try to skip the basics. There's a lot of people doing ice baths, intermittent fasting, or even a longer fast, like 3 days and stuff. And you're like,
We're looking for fast food,
Looking-
a magic pill, I suppose.
looking for the magic pill to make them feel better. And it's like, well, if you just done the basics, like you've just explained, drink water, like get your meal prep, even sandwiches. I mean, you can get all your macronutrients in a sandwich. Drinking water, meal prepping, just trying to get your 78 hours sleep a day. Just doing them things probably have 80% of the results that you're looking for. And then after that, you can do them little things that give you that extra 1-2%.
That's essentially the way that we work with absolutely everybody. Look, if we can get the foundations right, then we can start looking at maybe some of the other factors that are important. For example, around sleep, can we put a bit of a sleep routine in place? What are the sticking points? Are you struggling to sleep before earlies? Do you struggle to sleep after a night shift? Let's have a look at what your night shift routine looks like. Then we can start looking at those things. Like I've got a set thing that we always, with every single client that comes on board who does nights, we have like a routine in relation to nights that we'll try and implement for people. I'm more than happy to discuss it with you if you want me to. The way that we will always say to people is try and work midnight to midnight. Don't try and overcomplicate it. And if you eat something at 3 p.m, was that the day before? We always get that. And look, no, just work midnight to midnight. Keep it, because your body isn't going to know, but we do. So let's work a bit of a routine. So we'll always say to people, if a night shift day, for example, starts at 10, which is pretty standard right across the country, always try and have a little bit of a meal before you go. Something reasonably high in protein that's going to keep you feeling full. And then try and have your last meal around about 11 to 11:30. Um, the reason for that is because you want to try and set yourself up for the night. Anything after 12 o'clock, let's go for some protein snacks, whether that be a shake, whether that be, a little protein yogurt with some fruit or something that isn't going to take loads of time to metabolize and for you to kind of sit there and start feel full. We want something that's going to keep you feeling full, but not going to take you ages to consume. And then when you get back home, if you want to, then have something before you go to bed. So you set yourself up so you're not waking up after 3 hours hungry because you haven't eaten anything since the night before. But if you can focus on protein snacks during that period from maybe 12 till like your 6 o'clock when you're going to be finishing, one, they're quick, simple, and easy, and you're going to be feeling full. And pretty much everybody that we implement that with will always come to us and say, you know what, I didn't have that Macca's at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, yeah, because you felt full, because we put a bit of a routine in place. And that's a huge problem for a lot of people.
It's really good advice. And once they've managed to hit that objective once, like you said, they didn't have the Macca's once, then that little buzz they get from that, the little
I
sense.
think that's that I think is the big thing. It's about getting people to see the value in what they're doing. And I think the moment they do that, they have that bit of self-belief. You know what, this is actually working. There'll always be times when it doesn't happen. I'm talking in an ideal world that you're going to be able to have that last meal 11 till half 11. That might not happen, and you might have it at 12:30, 1 o'clock. No, you ain't going to die. It's just an ideal world that
I
we're
think that's
talking
where
about here.
that weekly monitoring that you mentioned comes in across the board, doesn't it? And about some days you have good days and bad. Some days things are possible, other days it's not. And I think as long as an average, we can hit the objectives, it speaks leaps and bounds about the long-term goals of how effective that's going to be.
Well, for me, the biggest thing that people struggle with is they struggle not to try and be perfect. That's the biggest thing. And if you try and be that, you will always fail, in my opinion, because you don't live in an ideal kind of world. You might get off late and you might not be able to do that workout. That's fine. Just move it to another day. It's fine.
Do you speak or touch on anything regarding hormones, because shift patterns and sleep patterns, it can really affect your hormones? I mean, obviously nutrition plays a massive part in that, but sleep is also massive regarding your hormones and having that sleep pattern and rest and proper like recovery.
Yeah, I mean, look, 1,000,000% probably females. It's probably more prevalent, especially when you're dealing with, that time of the month. That's huge for a lot of females. And we've got our fat loss specialist who is inside our program that specialises in working with females. So whenever a female comes on board, I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to be an expert in that area. I prefer to kind of know where my expertise lie, and that probably isn't with a female that's going to have hormones going up and down. Yes, of course I can advise, but I always try and point people in the direction of, look, well, we've got someone here that actually can support you with this. But you're right in relation to males as well. But the problem that we have is that when you're trying to get all these foundations right, if you try and bring in like talking to people about the hormones and about the testosterone levels, we can only really establish that if you're working with someone reasonably long term. And if we can get somebody, and we have, we've got people that have been with us like, 12, 18 months, 2 years. And then you can really start looking at it, maybe getting your blood work done. Massive, absolutely massive. And I'd encourage everybody to do it. I do it quite regularly.
The problem is it's a minefield for people that don't understand the basics of that. So how do you interpret that without paying whatever private companies a lot of money, I suppose?
And that's the problem that you have, in the fact that within the first initial period that they've paid, that they've invested in themselves, they're seeing it as the investment. For us to turn around to them then and say, well, a blood test could be really useful for you actually, but it's 130 quid. It feels, some people will do it, don't get me wrong, some people will definitely do it because they see their health not as an expense, but rather that as an investment, and that's great. But the majority of the stuff that we'll do is very much around trying to regulate their moods and their energy and things with the food choices.
I was suffering, this was a couple of years ago, I had vertigo, like brain fog. I was just like exhausted all of the time, even getting out of bed to go to work. You would think that I'd had no sleep for 3 days, basically. So I got some blood work done. And before this, by the way, I went to the actual doctors in the NHS, couldn't find anything, but I knew there was something else. And I come across a video regarding B12 and the like low B12 levels. So I took it upon myself to get my blood work done, like everything. I found out that my B12 was low, folate, and my testosterone was low. All them three things that the NHS couldn't tell me until I'd done a test privately. And then I took the test results to my doctor and then gave us stuff for my B12 and folate. And no word of a lie, within 2 weeks, all that went. I suffered for about a year and a half to 2 years with that brain fog and like fatigue. And within 2 weeks, great.
A client actually came to us with that energy levels in the gutter. You know, we were trying various different things, and I mentioned about the B12. I said, you know what, this might be for you, because you can get the injections, can't you, as well? You can kind of do, and she got it done, and B12 was in the gutter, and straight
Quite a
away.
big issue, isn't it? But yet no one
Yeah.
seems to be really talking about it at the minute. And I
No.
think it's a problem when you understand how we get B12 and things. I think it's a problem that's set to get bigger yet.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And the problem is when you've got, you know, you're deficient in B12, like you mentioned earlier, you don't realise how much of a problem it is and how difficult it is to function on a daily basis. And then you've got emergency service workers trying to drive cars at 150 miles an hour down the motorway, and they're energy living in the gutter because it's something that they're not aware of. It's a massive problem.
And like I said, that mental clarity that you need doing a job like that,
Yeah.
it's so important. So when you're deficient in something that affects your mental health and brain fog and how quick you can be to think, that's one of the most important things, I guess, that you need in a job like that.
1,000,000%, 1,000,000%.
I just want to quickly touch on one more mental health thing before we start kind of wrapping things up. I know that we've mentioned kind of briefly the PTSD and the imposter syndrome and that kind of thing, but one big thing for the emergency services in general is this sense of needing to be able to desensitize and normalize kind of the abnormal, I suppose. What would you say to anybody that's either thinking about coming into the emergency service or is quite new to the emergency services, that's really struggling with either detaching themselves from things or thinking that what they're feeling is not normal?
First thing I'd say is that it is completely normal. What you've got to accept is that you're going to see some horrible things. But that doesn't mean because you're wearing a uniform that that's not going to affect you. If anything, I would argue wearing the uniform, you're probably more susceptible to it because you're going to see more. The job, and I can only speak from the police perspective here, doesn't do a great job of it. It's not very good at all. We've got certain things in place, trim, which some people will speak well of it, some people, and from inside our program, and people that DM me will speak very poorly of it. That's meant to be like an intervention to help people, but it doesn't really, in my opinion, cut the mustard. It doesn't really do what it needs to do. There is still a stigma attached in the job that if you were to kind of put your hand up and say, I'm struggling a little bit, people worry, well, will I be removed from my frontline duty? Will there be a stigma attached to me? And that should never, ever be the case. I would much prefer someone to put their hand up and say, I'm struggling, rather than say nothing at all, suffer in silence, make a huge mistake at work because they haven't got the support, or even worse, start to do something outside the job that, you know, we can all probably imagine, and start to suffer. And I've seen it where colleagues have taken their own lives, and you wouldn't even know it. You wouldn't even imagine that that person was in crisis. The confidence, maybe in themselves and also in the job, to reach out and speak out.
Do you think that because they think, well, I'm a police officer, I should be able to cope with this? Is that a thing?
Yeah. And there's also a bit of probably a culture inside the job. Not so much now, because I think it is changing. It needs to change as well, because if it doesn't, there's going to be a lot of people let down. But certainly when I initially joined, there was a bit of a culture whereby, well, you're struggling with that, just man up a little bit. What do you mean? You know, it's wrong.
That matter, isn't it? Knowing where to draw the line, I suppose, because it is something that inevitably you need to be able to operate with, that you need to be able to deal with. But we're human first off, aren't we? And I suppose certain things get you to question your own mortality, what you could have done better. And I suppose that will go hand in hand with the imposter syndrome that you mentioned earlier. And before you know it, you're lying in bed on a night worrying about your own worth and that kind of thing.
But I think that's probably one of the biggest things that any new starter will have. They'll convince themselves, they'll look at other people and think, I'm never going to be able to do that. I'm never going to be able to do this. But the reality is, of course you will. Rome was never built in a day. You've got to make the mistakes to learn from them. And unfortunately, policing in general doesn't react well to mistakes. A police officer makes a mistake, it'll be in the news, or if there's a slip tongue, it'll be in the news. And I think that culture has really, and it's manifested itself now into a problem whereby people don't feel confident enough to reach out. And some of the stuff that like I do on social media is very much around that. I'm a big proponent of saying to people, reach out. Don't be afraid to go and speak to your colleagues, speak out to people. But the thing that always comes back to me, and I can't argue with it, if I do, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to get removed? Like if you're on firearms, do I get my authority removed? And then where does that leave me? I'm already in crisis, but now
Is there
you're
any
going to.
protection for that in terms of, is there anything in place where you can go and speak to somebody, or you can go and seek help, or you can go and do whatever you need to do, knowing that your job's going to be safe and that you can pay your mortgage at the end of the month?
Well, they'll have services, but if you were to mention various different things, the job would probably find out, and that's where it kind of lets itself down. You're also, thing is as well, that you're also talking to people that probably don't understand it, maybe that have never done it. For example, inside our program, we've got a psychological therapist inside our program that works alongside the physical side, that has worked in the emergency service world, he's got a PhD in it, and works with police forces. Her husband's actually a police officer, so she gets it. And we found that people open up more because she understands it, and she gets it. Whereas if you've just gone and seen 3 dead bodies on the floor and it's starting to affect you, and you go to somebody that's never ever even seen a dead body, how can they possibly relate to what you're talking about? I'm not suggesting for a second that you've got to have experienced every single thing that a police officer is going to come to, because that's completely unrealistic. I think is very, very important. It breaks down the barrier immediately. And for a lot of police officers, they're just absolutely, well, probably shit scared of what's going to happen. If I put my hand up here, where am I going to end up? I'm already in a position whereby I'm struggling. And if I get taken off the department that I've worked so hard to get to, what's that going to do to my mental health even further? And I don't think the job's thinking about that, if I'm honest.
Yeah. And there's a problem on the opposite side of that spectrum as well, isn't there? Where, if, like you mentioned, firearms, if somebody is suffering
and they don't.
in the right place, is that the person that you want standing in the public domain with a loaded rifle?
There is always two sides to it, isn't there? And the job is in a massive conundrum with it. I think what's got to happen, realistically, there's got to be a complete overhaul of it. You've got to break it down. You've got to invest some money, and like we've said at the very start, it was always about money. Everything is around budget, but you've got to accept sometimes that the welfare of the people that are going out there every day on the front line has to be the top priority. It can't be about, putting a fancy new, crest up, or a fancy new car park. Forget about that. 'Cause that's not what's important. What's important is, are you looking after the people that are putting their lives on the line every single day and dealing with untold amounts of trauma? Are you helping them in their lives? And the answer at the minute is probably not as well as what we could.
Well, it's been nice talking to you. I think there's a lot of insights there for people on both sides of emergency services and people who require the emergency services. I think it'll be a big eye opener for people on that aspect, but also eye opener for people on the issues that police officers and the police department are dealing with regarding the health and fitness and nutrition and the shift patterns and everything above and around that.
Look, I really appreciate you asking me on. It's difficult sometimes to get your message across, and you know, if this just helps one person maybe make a decision to join the police or join the fire service or the ambulance service, but have a better understanding of what maybe might face.
Maybe just answers a question for a member of the public. Do you want to just go through your Instagram again, if anybody wants to just have a little look, maybe have a bit laugh along or a bit of entertainment from it as well?
So it's at Blue Light Lifestyle. The idea behind the page is to put a bit of humour into a serious message, essentially. It was never my intention to do any sort of comedy stuff. My wife thinks I'm the most boringest bloke ever. So for people to come out and say, like, oh, you've made us smile, it's interesting.
Ian, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Mate, I really appreciate that.